Hey everybody, welcome back. Craig Schaup here with George Thomas, our film critic from the Akron Beacon Journal. George is here, and we've had a good little run here in the last few weeks of actually being in the movie theater. You've actually had a chance to go to the theater now several times, and this one is among one of the most anticipated of the summer, F1 the movie. George, is this a high-octane race to the theater, go see it movie, or is Brad Pitt stalled out?
Let's try this. Point blank, go see it in the you love Dolby Atmos. If
I
you're going to
do.
see this movie, see it on the biggest and loudest on the biggest screen in the loudest theater, an Atmos theater, if possible. It's an experience more than it is a film, but there's enough film there
Mm-hmm.
to make it, for lack of a better term, it's a good old fashioned summer blockbuster.
Yeah.
Based, and I'll call it semi-original IP because let's face it, Formula One racing is IP unto itself, and I
That is
wrote
true.
that. But it tells a story of, and it's a cliche story even.
It's Formula One, right? It's formulaic.
It's
Yeah.
very formulaic. Grizzled old freelance racing veteran Brad Pitt, Sonny Hayes, hired by his buddy to come in and basically take over his Formula One team in Europe and basically school the young gun, played by Damson Idris, to on how to do things the proper professional way. And we've seen the story before. We've seen the story a million times. Now, what sets this apart is Joseph Kosinski's direction. And I can't think of a better director at this moment in time, given Top Gun Maverick, to have done this film. And the use of the technology to basically immerse the audience in Formula One cars. It's a basic, for lack of better terms, thrill ride.
Yeah.
Now, that's all well and good. You can have all this technology and all this thrilling action on the racetrack, but does it really matter if there's no story to dig into? And it's a thin story, but you know what? Brad Pitt can still act his butt off.
Right.
Brad Pitt, who's been known, and mind you, love Brad Pitt. I loved his character in the Ocean's movie, but it was smarm and charm.
Yeah.
It was subtle, but it was smarm and charm.
Yeah.
And that's basically been a quasi calling card for him. That's gone. I mean, he's turned into this sage, wise mentor in this film, and he pulls it off. Whereas Damson Idris is everything you expect in what's basically a Gen Z racer.
Right.
He's arrogant. He's worried about clicks on his social media, and he knows it all. And they strike this nice balance. It's a tension-filled chemistry between the two that's obvious. It's a competitive tension, and there's plenty to take away from it and enjoy. So yeah, go see it. Run to go see it.
It's interesting. There was one hesitation that I had with this movie as it was, gaining its normal traction as a summer blockbuster. Originally titled F1, and then they put F1 the movie after that. It made me think, though, that is this just a commercial for F1? Is this just a advertisement for maybe trying to get people interested in the sport that is not quite as popular in America because we have NASCAR, although we have the Indy 500, which is super, super popular. But I think as a whole, it might seem more in the line of a European sport that maybe they're trying to migrate popularity over here to America. So I looked at that title change as they really want you to get all in on F1 in this country.
You can take this movie as a commercial for F1, especially given one of the producers is Lewis Hamilton.
Right, yeah.
So there we go. For those who don't know, Lewis Hamilton is grade A F1
Yes.
stud. But you know what? And mind you, there is, and the movie clocks in at 236, and in that 236, there is a lot in the commentary and in the races. There is a lot of explanatory stuff regarding F1 racing. So yeah,
Okay.
in some ways, it comes across as a lesson in what to look for if you're watching an F1 race. So I can't deny that aspect. But you know what? It's quasi interesting.
Yeah.
And I'm not even a race fan, but it didn't detract from the movie, and actually it helped it
Okay.
because you could understand what they were doing and why,
Okay.
and the strategy of it. So there we go.
Well, it's racing has become, in a lot of ways, maybe the new boxing in terms of movies. You think about Rocky, Raging Bull, the Hurricane, Ali, a lot of these boxing movies. I've always thought boxing movies translated pretty well to cinema. It seems like racing, you've had Rush, you've had Ford versus Ferrari, where, racing is sort of becoming I don't know if it's easier to portray on screen than other sports are, but it seems like racing is having its moment in the sun here in the last 20, 25 years of Hollywood.
Yeah, last decade more than anything, but
Yeah.
this one is a cut above because of the technology, and
Yeah.
that's a big difference. So, and mind you, narratively speaking, Ford versus Ferrari and Rush were better. I have no problem in admitting it.
Right.
So,
And of course, we can't forget Talladega Nights, the Ballad of Ricky Bobby, right? As a fine entry into the racing genre. That was obviously a very different film than these other ones, but nonetheless, though, I think it's worth watching as a race fan if you are. But although it maybe condescends a little bit to some race fans, but it's also Will Ferrell and John C. Reilly having about as much fun as you can have in a movie. But yeah. Well, it's good to hear. I'm glad you mentioned Joseph Kosinski. He's another. We've talked about this a few times, and I think I even mentioned it several shows ago about the directors that sort of just luck their way into these gigantic billion-dollar budgets and everything. And Kosinski's one of those. He came onto the scene with Tron Legacy, which is actually a movie I liked a lot. I really thought it was stunning.
really, absolutely.
Yeah, very beautiful film. I thought he showed I will say that I'm not sure that he really has the narrative down right now as a director, but I think from Tron, you can tell he's got a very creative visual palette. And then, of course, he went from that, which really wasn't a big success, into Oblivion with Tom Cruise. And now he's one of the biggest, blockbuster directors working. So he's kind of earned his way up the chain, but he had a pretty nice early career as he's able to, get Tom Cruise starring in a huge blockbuster. And of course, Top Gun. Yeah.
An underrated one, I believe, too.
Yeah. But, Kosinski's kind of one of these guys. I mean, I don't know if do you think the box office from a Top Gun Maverick mindset will transfer over to F1? I'm kind of curious how this movie does at the box office before it eventually comes onto Apple TV Plus.
It's projecting 115 to 120 this weekend.
Wow. Okay.
It will be Apple Original Films' first major theatrical hit. And given that they're talking about, in some respects, abandoning theatrical, I hope this changes their mind. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I could see this internationally just making buku bucks.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's gonna play well across the sea, without a doubt.
And Warner Brothers, did they do the distribution? Because I've seen Warner Brothers attached to this. Did they do the theatrical distribution on this?
They've got the distribution deal. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, a final grade for F1, the movie.
It was a solid B+.
Okay. All right. Well, hey, Brad Pitt, one of our last remaining movie stars. Why not give another opportunity to see him in theaters? And he's had a nice little run here lately. I think he's kind of picking and choosing different projects, kind of, working with different people. And I think he's kind of in that. And I know he's even said recently that, he's probably in the twilight of his career and maybe thinking more about retirement than he is, trying to do movie after movie after movie. And obviously I'm excited about he and Fincher teaming up for the sequel to Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, or at least the spin-off Cliff Booth movie with Netflix that is supposed to be a huge blockbuster, budget-wise at least. So I'm kind of interested to see how Fincher and Pitt treat that subject, as Tarantino is going to have a writing credit on that movie. So there's a lot of good things to like about that.
And he's talking about working with Tom Cruise again. So.
And Cruise, who, of course, like we mentioned earlier, a frequent worker with Kosinski, was at the premiere, and I think they were, having a fun time with it too. And they were supposed to be in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood together, and Cruise ended up not being in it, and DiCaprio. Well, actually, I think it was going to be Cruise that was going to be the Cliff Booth character, so he was actually going to be in the movie instead of Pitt. And of course, we all know Pitt wins an Oscar for that role, so very interesting to say the least. And I would love to see Pitt and Cruise back at it. I mean, how long has it been? Like 30 years or something?
I know they were very young. Let me pull up.
Interview with a Vampire. Is that the only collaboration?
Yeah, I think so.
So we're talking like almost 30 years probably between.
Yeah. Wow. We're old. No, I'm really old.
What I like about what both of these guys seem to be doing is, and I think Cruise probably got there a little bit later than I wanted him to, where Cruise has always been able to rely on the Mission Impossible series or other action adventure movies that he could, star in, get his, $25 million up front, and maybe, points on the back end or whatever, and make $100 million off of a movie. But I'm glad that Cruise is kind of finally transitioning a little bit into, I want to act more. I want to be in something a little bit more substantial.
Interesting. And yeah, it's like,
not that his stuff has been bad. It's just, you want to see him use those like Magnolia, Born on the 4th of July acting chops.
Exactly. The stuff he did to get to where he could be Tom Cruise.
Right. And I think Brad Pitt found that a little sooner, and maybe I'm biased in this, and as far as my favorite director goes, but Pitt worked with Tarantino, and he's worked with him a few times, and I think Pitt started finally realizing, like, yeah, I could coast by and just make one big blockbuster after another, but he started saying, I want to work with different types of directors, and some of those top shelf guys, and Cruise is going to be doing that, I believe, next year with the new Alejandro Gonzalez Iñárritu movie. So I think Cruise is getting to that point now, and I think Pitt's getting to that point where they want to. I think financially they're probably set, and
they're both producers,
and they can both make a bunch of money anyway. Even obviously a Tarantino movie is not being made on a shoestring budget anymore, so. It's good to see these two, legends kind of transitioning into, maybe a nice acting career, not that they haven't had that, but, really see Cruise show people that he's more than just I do all these weird, crazy stunts.
Now see, and herein lies the question. Who are the last two movie stars of their caliber to transition to the more interesting stuff in the twilight of their career? Now, I've got two.
I thought Robert Redford kind of did some of that. Newman
and Redford.
Yeah.
And I can't really think of anyone else.
Yeah.
And if you can have a career like Newman and Redford, you're for lack of a better term, you are bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
Period.
Well, and I know, Cruise is going to be getting an honorary Oscar next year. So he may never win an Oscar for acting or producing, whatever it may be. But I just want to see him starring in movies that allow him to do his thing, because I think people have lost sight of his ability to act because, he gets so bogged down into these formulaic action movies where he can just put it on autopilot and not really have to do much acting or show a lot of range. But every time I talk to people, and they say, "Well, I'm not really a big fan of Tom Cruise," and it might be personal, whatever. But if it's from a professional standpoint, it's always like, "Well, he's not that great of an actor." And I'm like, "Well, have you seen Magnolia? Have you seen Born on the 4th of July?" The guy can bring it when he's given the material to do so. And even, I mean, this is a completely different genre, but even Tropic Thunder, Robert Downey Jr. was fantastic in that movie and deserved his Oscar nomination. But Tom Cruise was so crazy in that movie. It was a great performance. I mean, it was like throttle all the way down. It was a great performance as Les Grossman, and even so much so that they even thought about doing a spin-off movie with that character because it was so popular and everybody was just praising his work there in that movie.
Comedies don't get nominated. He probably should have been nominated for an Oscar for that role. And I'd argue he went toe to toe with Nicholson in A Few Good Men.
Yeah.
What are you talking about? He's not a very good actor.
Yeah,
Nicholson.
I think people just lose sight of it. They because and maybe it's because for the last, but even in other movies like Minority Report, like he's acting even though it's surrounded by a big blockbuster scale like Steven Spielberg type movie. And I just think people forget like what he's capable of when you get the right words in his mouth. And I think that's why I've always wanted him to work with Tarantino or other, great, obviously he's worked with great directors, but, just being able to put himself into situations where he can work with, people like Scorsese or Spielberg and those types of directors that, are going to bring out a great performance, even though he doesn't need help bringing that out, but just give him the material to work with that will make him deliver just an Oscar-worthy performance.
Oh, I agree wholeheartedly.
All right. Well, obviously we talk a lot of streaming, and George, you write a weekly column on what you've been watching. I know that there's some big releases coming up and already out. Ironheart on Disney Plus, the latest in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Tell everybody about Ironheart and if they should watch it.
This is where we go back to the subjectivity of what we do. Because I think Ironheart is getting a bad rap in some circles we won't go into the political and other reasons. This is, in my eyes, is probably one of the better Marvel television series to come out in a while because it's, first of all, it's a 6-episode limited series.
Mm-hmm.
The lead, Dominique Thorne, is fantastic. And because it's Ironheart and not Iron Man, it's going to have its detractors because the character is black. She's a genius and builds her own iron suit based on Tony Stark's technology and pulls it off. And people are going to quibble with it. But see, they neglect some things like, well, she was at MIT. You know what I?
Right. Yeah.
MIT doesn't exactly do DEI now, does it?
Right.
You have to have something to get in there. And I realize we're talking fiction, but she gets tossed from MIT. She's having a crisis. Her character is having a crisis as to who she is and what she wants to be. And forced to return home to Chicago to basically find herself. Well, even with all the genius, and one of the things I liked about this series, all of her genius, it's susceptible to being influenced by wanting to take one of the flaws of youth is impatience. That's the best way to put it.
Yeah.
She wants to do big things. She wants to do big things. She wants to do big things her way. And she couldn't do that at MIT. So when she gets back to Chicago, she's willing to take shortcuts and without giving away too many things. Shortcuts involve legalities, criminality, all this stuff. And it there's the action, there's the thrust of it, but it takes a turn, and it takes a welcome turn, because in the process of developing her suit, we get to learn more of her backstory, and it includes a tragedy in her life, a trauma, where her stepfather and her best friend are gunned down in a drive-by. Now, she's developing the suit and developing the operating system for it. She scans her brain, and the technology picks up on the memories of her dead friend, and that becomes the AI. Now, yeah, there's plenty of iron in this story, but the heart comes from, Tony Stark had Jarvis.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't necessarily have a relationship, but that, but her character's relationship with her best friend is the AI, is the heart of the story, and it's unexpected, and it's wonderful to see it develop. And I had access to all 6 episodes. I binged all 6 in a day,
Okay.
and it's to me it's that good.
Okay. Final grade for Ironheart if you were giving it
Plus,
out.
B
Okay.
plus, without a doubt.
All right. Well, fantastic. Well, another show that hasn't premiered just yet, but will be on
Yeah,
Apple TV Plus. You've
tomorrow,
got the 27th, I think. Yeah.
yeah,
So Smoke comes out. This is an Apple TV Plus, and I tell you what, I mean, when you're talking about source material, you're talking about a very nice pedigree for source material for Smoke, because the same novelist has penned some great movie adaptations: Mystic River, Gone Baby Gone, Shutter Island. Also, Dennis Lehane has written The Outsider, Gone Baby Gone. I mentioned Live by Night. Maybe not so much, but Boardwalk Empire. So we've got some good source material. We've got some good stars attached. Tell us about Smoke.
and the nice thing about this one is he's a showrunner. He's running the show in this one. It's about a we meet Taron Egerton's character as he was a former fireman dealing with the trauma associated with nearly dying in a fire, and it forced him to become a fire investigator. He investigates arsons, and he's on the trail of not one but 2 serial arsonists. And in this 9-episode series, we get into his psyche and the psyche of his partner, played by Jussie Smollett, a detective assigned to work with him. And it's a character study using fire and smoke as a metaphor. I mean, this could have easily been, and again, this is one of those shows I binged in a day. I put it on while I was writing, and it often sucked me out of writing. Um, it's a character study as much as it is a mystery, and it's extremely well acted. Um, Edgerton is fantastic. Jussie Smollett matches him note for note. And the thing is, although it's revealed, some of what's going on is revealed. I think it's 4 episodes in. It manages to keep evolving throughout. It's weird in that it goes from very subtle to a bit manic towards the end. And it's like, it just heightens throughout. And the performances match that tension, that tone. And, there's nothing to dislike about it. I mean, it maybe slogs a little bit, maybe. John Leguizamo shows up at one point, and you know, you talk about character actors with chops. Now, that's one that never gets a lot of credit because not only that he brings dramatic gravitas, but he brings comedic gravitas as well. And we both know he started as a stand-up comedian, a comedic actor, but he's
Right.
grown something beyond that. And he shows up and is absolutely he's like Tom Cruise in Tropic Thunder.
Okay.
He's on the screen, and you know he's on the screen because he's stealing the scene effortlessly. So, and it has Greg Kinnear, someone who got a bit of a shot at leading roles back in the '90s,
Yeah.
and he's older now, so he's going to be a character actor. But you remember how good Greg Kinnear could be, and another great performance. But and I can't pronounce this guy's name, Intare Guma Mbaho. I'm butchering his name, and I apologize. It's revealed early that he's likely one of the arsonists. It's revealed in the first episode. I'm not giving anything up. Okay? As Freddie Fasano, you can see pain in his eyes, the deterioration in his eyes throughout his entire run in the series. And by the end of his run, he's unpredictable and you don't know what this character is going to do.
Yeah.
And it's a thing to behold. It's a joy to watch. Like I said, I binged it in a day.
Well, it sounds like, I mean, obviously, you've been beating the drum a lot for Apple TV Plus for a while now. Obviously, there are some shows that I completely love, as one of my dogs is mentioning her love for some of the shows. But, it's good, like you said, to see like Leguizamo and Kinnear get in. And, sometimes I think with streaming, because, you try to maybe save a little bit on production costs, you maybe get a lot of actors that people might not know, but that, could become household names. But it's nice to see people that you're going to recognize outside of the stars of, the main characters. You're going to recognize these people inhabiting this world. So it gives it a little bit of star quality that I think sometimes you don't see as much in streaming, because there is so much going on in streaming right now that you try to tamp down the budgets a little bit. And maybe you get cheaper actors that you can kind of turn into household names, but don't, swell the budget too much to where you don't want to greenlight a project.
Well, one thing I like about Apple TV is that they're willing to pay those actors with faces in the skill. And that's great. That's fine. And I appreciate that.
Yeah, well, Apple TV Plus thickening up the library. They're going to have F1 up there at some point very soon. And, of course, Smoke debuts on the 27th. Anything else that you have been watching streaming-wise?
Actually, those were the big two. I mean, we talked about Echo Valley. It's like apparently streaming is going into a dead mode for the July 4th holiday. I mean, my next column is going to be, well, in case you missed it, there's this, and this, and
yeah,
I'm going to dig for it because nothing really interested me. So we're going to go scan through my screening app and figure something out.
Okay. Well, I know Jurassic World Rebirth, is that going to be on the docket for next week for you?
I believe so.
All right. Well, another big summer blockbuster release of a movie that I can't understand would get made, but it will make $1 bazillion, and it will be a movie that people will think, you could have said in the first 5 minutes, why would we do this again? But okay,
you and I both know the answer.
Off the soapbox on this.
Let's
how
be
stupid can people be? And let's say, hey, let's have Jurassic World again. Let's have a Jurassic Park movie. I think this one might seem a little bit different in that they're going back to the original park or something, and they found, I don't know. I don't really care, to be honest with you. It's not a movie that I will watch, but I'm glad that you will watch it and be able to tell us all about it.
I'm glad you're being subjected to it.
Well,
So you tell us
but you know what though? What if it's a great movie and I missed out on it and you got to see it? Now, if it, I might see it, but at some point. But I don't think I'm going to rush to the theaters.
dude.
Because I've only watched about half of the Chris Pratt. Um, I guess it would have been the reboot or whatever you want to call it, or sequel. I don't know what it was, but I watched like half of it and I thought, nah, this isn't for me, so I was done.
Dude, with all due respect, and we're back to this age thing. I can tell you the theater I was wowed about Jurassic Park.
Well, yeah, I
And,
mean, Jurassic
and,
Park
and,
got a lot
and
of, yeah.
that's why I have a problem, because that, to me, Jurassic Park was Jaws like, or Spielberg. You know what I
Mhm.
mean?
Yeah.
And
Well,
the only reason he directed the sequel is because he didn't want anybody to really screw it up like Jaws did. And
well, yeah. Jaws did not have nice. It didn't have good fins after the first one, that's for sure. But I'm sure there'll be plenty of legs for the Jurassic World franchise. But yeah, you're right. I mean, Jurassic Park's certainly not one of my favorite Spielberg movies, but it also, I get what you're saying though. It has that sense of awe and wonder that some of
exactly.
his best movies have, and I think it was a technical marvel there for 1993, and still holds up to this day
Oh,
to a
absolutely.
large degree. It's not like, again, it's not something I seek out, but it also was the first, which means you can understand why someone would have this like clouded mind of thinking that they could do this. And then, of course, when it fails, I think everybody in the world from then on out should say, yeah, this already happened. And if it's happening in the same world as Jurassic Park, it shouldn't ever happen again. And that's, I think, if they said that these Jurassic World movies didn't exist within the world of Jurassic Park, I think they would be at least like understandable monster movies, like, oh hey, what if dinosaurs roam the earth now. But it's not, when it's in that same category as Jurassic Park and it lives in that same world and ecosystem, it just makes you question how stupid humanity could be to say let's do this again. It doesn't make sense.
But there's financial incentive to do it
Well,
again.
there's plenty
So
of
there
there's
we
plenty of
go.
reason for Universal to say, hey, we haven't gone to the well too many times on this, have we? So,
Oh,
but I will say, I'm glad that Mahershala Ali will get a nice paycheck, Scarlett Johansson will get a nice paycheck, and the checks will clear for them. I do know that.
my boy Mickey Holler from the Lincoln Lawyer is in it too.
Okay.
They're not pumping him up too much, so my guess is he dies early. We'll see.
Someone's got to get eaten by the dinosaur to teach us a lesson, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, as always, George, we appreciate you stopping by. We hope you do have fun at the movies again, because you'll be in the theaters for Jurassic World Rebirth. You can always read everything by George at beaconjournal.com. You can also watch his capsule reviews of all of his movies that he tends to write about. So that's exciting. And of course, your weekly streaming column that gives people all the details on if they want to stay out of this 900-degree heat, they can watch and stay inside for a change, which is not too bad either.
Yeah. There's never been a better reason to escape to a theater than the weather.
Absolutely. All right, George, we will see you next week. Have fun with Jurassic World.
You like putting that dagger in there, don't you?